Green Vote is an alternative to the other parties promoting a green Reading by reducing our emissions and campaigning for fairness. This election, for the first time, we have a real chance in Brighton, Norwich and London, as well as in Parkwood in the local elections. The first past the post system favours the big parties and incumbents. Despite this, we have over 100 councillors. With PR, we do better in the Euro elections, where we have a Green MEP in the South East, Caroline Lucas, and in London, Jean Lambert. This election is very different to the last one. Last time, the other politicians knew very little about green issues. Thanks in part to our successes, they have had to change. So now most politicians talk about green issues. So how do you tell green from greenwash? You have to read what they say with care. You have to read what we say with care, I should include myself. Politicians are rated with estate agents and bankers as the least trusted of people for a reason. The big three parties will say they support renewable energy, but often vote against wind power. They support road and airport expansion. Thanks to the Greens, Germany has more solar roofs in just 1 month than the UK in 3 years. While there was £100 million worth of green stimulus, there was 2.3 billion put aside to assist the car industry. We want a 10% cut in emissions in the coming year, with serious year-on-year cuts after that to cut by 40% by 2020. Scientists say that that's what we need to have a chance of avoiding climate change. The policies to achieve these cuts will have wider benefits, like warmer homes and much better transport for hundreds of thousands of jobs. The Green Party has led the way, and Kirklees, the free insulation scheme that a handful of Green councillors pioneered there, can save houses £300 a year in heating expense.
Well, the first key point is the recognition of climate change as a global environmental threat. The UK and other developed countries need to take a lead in cutting emissions and transforming themselves into low-carbon economies. So closer home, the Liberal Democrats bring together environmentalism and liberal market economics. Our sustainable economics include carbon taxes, which are clearly the best way of setting a carbon price for consumers and producers alike. Liberal Democrats support the concept, but note that the EU carbon trading regime has so far had minimal impact on the carbon price because permits have been issued, dare I say it, far too liberally. Another key step forward is to introduce realistic pricing for aviation in ways that circumvent the treaty restrictions on taxing aviation fuel. Aviation is a rapidly growing source of emissions. It is unfair. It distorts tax advantages over other modes of transport, notably rail, because there is no tax on fuel and no charge on landing rights. And as a result, aviation doesn't pay for carbon or even much of the pollution, and that includes noise pollution that it causes. We suggest as one modest first step, changing the tax base and increasing tax by applying it to flight takeoffs in a way that captures the emissions generated by the engines and flight distance.
I think I'm going to make 3 points to do with this debate. The first is that we need very, very clear targets on what we do, and the Labour Party, both nationally and locally, has set those targets. I think it's universally been acclaimed that Ed Miliband, cross-party consensus, has done very well at setting national targets, taking the lead, making sure we've got some sort of international agreement. We've set very good local targets to make sure that we're cutting emissions. I think the Labour Party was one of the first to make sure that we signed up to the 10% target to reduce emissions, and I'm trying to do my bit personally. We've got good targets, 40% target to make sure that locally we have more recycling, we have less landfill, but we can't be complacent. The time to act with climate change is now. We need to make sure that we get on with it. I know that I'm preaching to the converted here. The fact that you've come along to this debate means that you're very concerned about climate change, but we've got to accept the vast majority of the public. We need to get them on board if we're going to be successful. I think the second point I would make is it's about local priorities. Now, I know that locally and nationally the Labour Party is committed to making sure that we get it right at a local level. And the Labour Party here has fought very, very hard to make sure that Kennet Meadows has not been built on, isn't going to be built on in the future. It's local campaigns like that that really make a difference. And I know that my predecessor as the Labour candidate, Martin Salter, has been absolutely instrumental over the last 12, 13, 14, 25 years in public office of taking forward those things, of making sure that he's got those networks with local people. And I hope to carry on that tradition both as a candidate and successful, I don't know.
I would have failed if in 5 years there are not many more people using public transport and fewer journeys by car. That was John Prescott, Secretary of State for the Transport and the Environment in 1997. Guess what? He failed. We will lead the fight against global warming through our target of a 20% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions by the year 2010. That was in the Labour Party manifesto in 1997. That's right, they failed. We must move from a largely fossil fuel-based economy to an economy primarily powered by low-carbon energy. It's Gordon Brown, speech on climate change. I think you know the outcome. Now, the overall message is that we have a long way to go to reach our commitments to reduce emissions. So what are the Conservative Party's policies? Some have claimed that the party's focus on the environment is a recent conversion. Well, actually, the Conservatives have a long and proud history on the environment. Benjamin Disraeli's government enacted the River Pollution Prevention Act into law to prevent the dumping of raw sewage into Britain's rivers. It was the Conservative government that brought in the Clean Air Act. It was the Conservatives who introduced the Green Belt across England in the 1950s to preserve our countryside. And it was Margaret Thatcher, that's right, Margaret Thatcher, who was the first international leader to speak to the UN General Assembly on the dangers of climate change. The Conservatives have a vision for our environment and for Britain. It's a vision where our homes require less energy and produce far more of their own energy, where high-speed trains whisk us from north to south, where Britain leads the world in new green technologies, where our energy security is safeguarded regardless of decisions made by volatile governments elsewhere, where targets for cutting carbon emissions are actually met. I look forward to discussing the detail of our policies for the practical delivery of this vision with you tonight.